My name's Mark, and you're listening to Headstraight. Hello, you lot, and welcome back. Today, we're going to answer the question, you're doing adult life, so why doesn't it feel like it? Now, you grow up thinking that adulthood is going to feel different. There's a point where it all clicks, where you suddenly feel more certain, more in control, like you know what you're doing. You imagine that version of yourself, handling things properly, making decisions without overthinking, just getting on with life without second-guessing everything. And then you get there. You're working, paying for things, sorting your own life out. And it doesn't feel like that at all. Nothing clicks. There's no moment when everything suddenly makes sense. You're still figuring things out as you go, still second-guessing decisions, still working things out in real time. And the weird part is, no one seems to acknowledge that. Because from the outside, this is it. This is being an adult. But from the inside, it doesn't match the picture that you had in your head. It feels a lot less certain, a lot more improvised, like you're just dealing with things as they come up rather than feeling like you've got some solid handle on it. And that gap between what you expected it to feel like and what it actually feels like, that's where the doubt creeps in. Is this it? Am I doing this properly? Why doesn't this feel like how I thought it would? And when you look around, it seems like other people have settled into it more, like they've got a rhythm, a way of handling things, a sense of what they're doing. And you're thinking, why doesn't it feel like that for me? So I want you to just pause for a second, because if you're doing adult life, but it still feels a bit uncertain, a bit improvised, like you're working it out as you go, that's not you missing something. That's you seeing it clearly, because this stage doesn't arrive fully formed. It builds, and it builds in a way that no one really explains. So if it doesn't feel like how you expected, well, what's actually going on? Why doesn't adulthood ever seem to just click into place? Well, it's because there isn't a moment when it all comes together. There's no clear line that you cross. No point where someone turns around and says, right, this is it now. You've got it. It doesn't work like that. Instead, it happens gradually, bit by bit. You take on more responsibility. You deal with more situations. You make more decisions. And over time, your life changes. But the feeling you expected to come with that doesn't arrive in the same way. Because most of what you're still doing for the first time. You've never handled this exact situation before. So of course it feels uncertain. You're not repeating something that you've mastered. You're figuring out things as you go, and that's what throws people off. Because you expect experience to feel like confidence straight away. But it doesn't. Experience often feels like uncertainty until you've been through it a few times. And at this stage of life, a lot of things are still new, even if on the outside it looks like you've settled into it. And there's another part to this. The idea of adulthood that most people grow up with isn't based on reality. It's based on what things look like from the outside. When you're younger, adults seem certain. They seem like they know what they're doing, like they've got a plan, like things make sense to them. But you're only seeing the surface. You're not seeing the second-guessing, the figuring things out, the moment where they're unsure as well. So you grow up expecting adult to feel solid. And when it doesn't, well, you assume that something's off. But what you're experiencing now is what it really looks like. It's not a finished version of yourself. It's an ongoing process. Adapting, adjusting, learning as you go. And it doesn't come with a clear signal. It doesn't feel like arrival. It feels like movement. And once you understand that it isn't something that suddenly clicks into place, it starts to make a lot more sense. Not because everything becomes easy, but because you stop expecting a moment that was never going to happen. And even when you understand that, Even when you know that there's no moment where it all clicks, it can still feel like you're the one that hasn't quite got it. Because when you look around, other people seem more settled. Like they found a rhythm, like they know how to handle things, like they're more sure of themselves. And you're comparing that to how you feel inside your own head, which still feels a bit uncertain, still feels like you're working things out as you go, still feels like you're not completely confident in what you're doing. So it creates this gap between what you think an adult should feel like and what you actually feel like. And that gap turns into doubt. Maybe I'm behind. Maybe I should have figured this out by now. Maybe I'm not as capable as other people. And that's where the imposter feeling creeps in. Not in a massive dramatic way, but just in those small moments when you hesitate before making a decision, when you second guess yourself after you've made one, when something doesn't go to plan and you're not sure how to handle it. It's that quiet sense of, I don't really know what I'm doing. And the thing is, you assume that other people don't feel like that because they don't show it. They look like they're getting on with things, making decisions, handling situations. So it's easy to think, they've got it. I haven't. But what you're not seeing is that most people are doing exactly the same thing that you are. They're handling things on the outside whilst still figuring out on the inside. They're making decisions without feeling completely certain. They're dealing with situations without feeling fully prepared. They're just doing it anyway. And that's the part that often gets missed, because you think adulthood is about feeling ready. But most of the time, it's about acting before you feel ready and learning through that. Which means the feeling that you're having, that sense of not being fully sure, isn't a sign that you're behind. It's a sign that you're in it. You're in the part where you're building experience, where things still feel new enough to feel uncertain. And once you see that clearly, the comparison starts to shift. Because it's no longer, they've got it, but I haven't. It becomes, we're all figuring this out, just at different points. So let's reset this, because a lot of the pressure that you're feeling here comes from an idea that doesn't actually exist. The idea that there's a point where you become a fully formed adult, confident, certain, completely in control. Like there's a version of you out there who's got it all together and you're just not there yet. But that version doesn't exist. There isn't a finished version of an adult. There isn't a point where everything suddenly feels clear and stays that way. What people call being an adult isn't a feeling, it's a set of responsibilities. It's dealing with things that need to be dealt with, making decisions when you have to, handling situations as they come up, often without feeling fully ready, and doing that consistently over time. That's it. Not feeling confident all the time, not having everything figured out, just showing up and handling what's in front of you. And here's the important shift. Confidence doesn't come first. Confidence follows. It builds after you've dealt with things a few times, after you've made decisions, even imperfect ones, after you've handled situations you weren't completely sure about. That's where it comes from. Not from waiting until you feel ready, because if you wait for that, I'm going to be honest with you, you'll be waiting a very long time. So instead of asking, why don't I feel like an adult? A more useful way to look at it is this. Am I taking responsibility for what's in front of me? Because that's the part that actually matters. Not how it feels, what you're doing. And if you look at it like that, there's a good chance that you're already doing more of it than you realise. Handling things, making decisions, figuring things out as you go, even if it still feels uncertain. And that isn't you falling short, that's you building it in real time. Not perfectly, but just gradually. So if this is where you are, doing the things but not quite feeling like you've got it, what actually helps? Not becoming some ideal version of an adult, Just feeling a bit more steady in your own life? Well, the first thing is let go of the idea that everyone else has it sorted, because they don't. People often look more certain than they feel. They make decisions, they get on with things, they handle what's in front of them. But that doesn't mean that they feel completely confident doing it. So if you're waiting to feel like that before you trust yourself, you're setting the bar in the wrong place, because the feeling isn't the goal, the doing is. The second thing is get clear on what you're actually responsible for. Not everything, but just what's yours. Your time, your money, your commitments, the things that directly affect your life. Because when everything feels vague, it all feels heavier than it actually is. But when you narrow it down, it becomes much more manageable. You're not responsible for having everything figured out. You're responsible for what's in front of you. And that's a much clearer place to operate from. The third thing is build some structure around yourself. Not strict routines that look good from the outside, but simple ones that actually support you. Things that make your day easier to manage. Maybe it's setting time to check your finances. Maybe it's planning your work ahead in a basic way. Maybe it's just having a consistent way of keeping on top of things. Nothing complicated, just enough structure to stop everything feeling reactive. Because when everything feels reactive, you feel like you're always catching up. But when you've got even a small amount of structure, things start to feel more in control. And one more thing. You don't have to do all of this on your own, because there's this idea that being an adult means handling everything independently. But that's not actually how it works. People rely on support. They ask for advice. They lean on others when they need to. They use what's around them to stay steady. Now, that's not a weakness. That's part of doing this properly. Because independence isn't about doing everything alone. It's about knowing what you can handle and knowing where to get support when you need it. And when you start approaching it like that, not trying to feel like an adult, but just building things that support your life, it starts to feel less like you're behind and more like you're finding your way through it. So, if you take nothing else from the episode, I want you to take this. You're not behind. You haven't missed something. And you're not waiting to become a different version of yourself before this starts to feel right. Because it doesn't suddenly click. It builds through what you do, through what you handle, through the way that you deal with things as they come up, even when it still feels a bit uncertain. And that's allowed. Because feeling unsure doesn't mean that you're not doing it properly. It means that you're still in the part where you're figuring things out. And that's not a problem. That's the process. So instead of trying to feel like an adult, bring it back to something simpler. What's one thing that you can put in place that actually supports your life? Not something that looks good. Not something that makes you feel like you've got it all together. Just something that makes things a bit easier to manage. So here's something that you can try. Pick one small routine this week. Something simple, something that supports you. Remember these examples? Maybe it's planning your week ahead. Maybe it's setting time to deal with your finances, or maybe it's just creating a bit more structure in your day. Now, it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to help. Because this isn't about becoming a finished version of an adult. It's about building something that works for you. And that happens gradually. One decision at a time. One responsibility at a time. One bit of structure at a time. And the more you do that, then the steadier it starts to feel. Not because you suddenly arrive somewhere, but because you built something that holds. So let's take a look at what's coming up in the next episode. Because there's another part that no one really prepares you for. What happens when life doesn't just feel uncertain, but actually hits harder than you expected? When things don't go to plan, when something knocks you, when you're dealing with much more than you thought you could handle. So, are you up for it? Of course you are.